Morning, everyone, if anyone is there. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. Our plan is going to be to kind of make essentially what you would see as an activity feed on like Streamlabs OBS or Stream Elements, stuff like that, but using Event Sub from Twitch, coupled with their API to kind of pull some more information. Because right now all you see is, oh, so-and-so followed you, or so-and-so subbed. If you want to see their profile picture, you can't really do that, I don't think. So also with follows and the follow bots that are going on and everything, you don't know too much about that person, right? But you kind of want to know, without really giving it away that you know, information about them that could potentially tell you, hey, this is a follow bot, or hey, this is kind of odd. So we can try and pull like the created date. We could try and pull the created date of the account. Try and pull how many followers they have, how many people they're following, and so on. I'm not sure how easy a lot of this is going to be, but that's the whole part of this adventure, is we're going to be basically doing a code along project. So this is a graph, or a diagram rather, that I've kind of built out, and it's my general idea of how we're going to do this. First and foremost, at the top here, we could see we have the front end starting from the left. The front end is mostly going to be run with JavaScript and a little bit of HTML and CSS to kind of make it look a little pretty. Try and learn some technologies in there of JavaScript, trying to use a WebSocket to connect to a backend that's run by Python. This backend is going to be handling the events from Twitch. It's also going to be receiving and fetching a bunch of information from Twitch over the API, so we can get the information about students. Sorry, not students. I don't know why I said students. About the users and about the people who are performing these events. So for instance, if someone gifts a sub, we can just display a profile picture next to them and say so-and-so's username, right? And have their profile picture there. Gifted a sub, and you have the tier or something like that to another user and show that user's profile picture. And what we're going to do with that is, with the Python part, that's going to be handling our event sub and API. And so when I say event sub, that's essentially webhooks. So Twitch is going to inform us of when events happen. And then with that, we're going to also use our API connection to Twitch. And we're going to say, okay, we want to know more information about this user or more information about this channel, because we can even have like a status page or an event list where it even shows when you go live. And we could pull what the API shows as your current title, the current game, kind of maybe use it as a reminder of, hey, if you're looking at this page and you just went live, Twitch told us you went live. We went to Twitch and we said, what's your title? What's your category? And we display it to you, and we show you the start time and everything too, just so general statistic information. But if you forgot to change your category before you started the stream, then that would be a good reminder when you see it and say, oh, hey, I need to go change that. So this is going to be roughly 3 parts technically. We'll start with the front end on the left-hand side here, where the front end, we're going to have people log in with Twitch, right? And the reason we do this is because with Event Sub with Twitch, in order to receive those events from Twitch about users doing things or things happening with them, we need to authenticate it so that it doesn't cost us anything, because otherwise we're going to be limited to 10,000 events. And depending on the size of how this goes, we may hit 10,000 really quickly, especially if we're going to be subscribing to follows, live events, offline events. You know, you changed your title, you got gifted subs, you got bits, you got, you know, so on and so forth. It starts adding up. That could become roughly about 10 or more per one user, right? And so we want to try and limit that as much as possible to where we're not using it too much, or we're not hitting that cost limit, so that as many people as possible can use this. And also, just as general practice. You want to know, for instance, if we want to know when they got gifted subs, I'm pretty sure that requires a special scope and authorization. So what we're going to do is we're going to have them authenticate and go to the back end, get redirected to Twitch. That redirects back to a website, and it validates the authorization and that the scope and everything is good. If it is good, we'll subscribe the events for our users. And if it's not good, we're going to display an error saying invalid authentication or whatnot. It shouldn't happen too much, but it's possible. So we're just going to try and account for it when we get there. When we do subscribe the user to events, when they get redirected to our site after authenticating successfully, we're going to go through and we're going to say, okay, we're going to subscribe to all these events that we want. So follows, bits, subscribers, maybe even like bans, unbans, timeouts, things like that. So if we can get as much information as possible for this one user, we can show them more information and try and make it a more rich experience for them to kind of have more information like that. And then once we subscribe them to all of those events, then we redirect them to a page that contains some JavaScript, kind of with an authorization token as well that we get from Twitch so that we can use that in our requests. Because we don't want users to be able to see other users' events. We want them to just see the ones for themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, the JavaScript page, or the HTML page rather, that they get redirected to is going to contain some JavaScript. It's going to establish a WebSocket to the backend, or Python, where when Python receives an event, it'll fire it off to the WebSocket, and then JavaScript can take over from that event's information, determine how to display it and what to show. Or we could do that all in Python, have everything kind of formatted as we want it, and then just send it off, and then the JavaScript just simply adds it to our list. The second part of this is going to be the back end. So the back end is going to be really when we get told about events from Twitch. So by back end, it's more Twitch is telling us something. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it's valid, because Twitch includes like secret information. When you go to subscribe someone, you can send them a secret. You can say, hey, this is a secret. I want everything to be signed with. And in that, in every response you get, or every notification from Twitch you get, you receive a header that kind of gives like a signed hash. And that hash you can use to compute to make sure that this actually came from Twitch, because we don't want to be firing off events and showing things for people if it didn't really come from Twitch, right? We want it to be for sure from Twitch. Otherwise, it's just fake information and we ignore it. So once we've validated the event, if it's not valid, we just return an error, and we'll return a status code error. Hey, binary. If the event is valid, we're going to go to retrieve additional information. So for instance, like follows, we could pull their profile picture, create a date, number of people they follow, number of people that follow them, and go from there. Once we get all of that additional information, yeah, I'm putting it on YouTube. I'm trying this out. See how this goes, just so it's also fully recorded too. But once we validate the event and we get that additional information, we can trigger the WebSocket event, which will go on to the third stage. How are you today, binary? Hopefully you're doing all right. Hopefully the music's not too loud or anything either. I'm just doing like a general overview of the project I want to do for this. Showing off and describing this diagram. In bed? Nice. Lazy Sunday, always the best. And then the third part's going to be when an event is triggered. I'm not too sure how this is going to get implemented yet. You hardly hear the music. It's perfect. Okay. I can turn it up if you want it, but we'll see. So if the event is triggered, right? This is where my lack of knowledge is, and where the learning process of this will go, is with WebSockets, I believe we can store information for each WebSocket, but if not, so that we can say this connection is for this particular user, then we can go through and we can say, okay, we only want to fire it to this WebSocket connection. But if that's not the case, then within JavaScript, we might have to check if it's for the user that we're actually currently using. And I'm hoping that's not the case, because that could become everybody sees everybody's events. But if it is for that user and it gets fired, we add it to the list of events with additional information such as creation date, followers, following, profile picture, etc. And if it's not for that user, we just ignore it, or we fire it off to the WebSocket for that specific user. If there's even a connection for it, maybe the person's not even listening for events, so we just kind of pass it along and it goes to the void. All right. So that was a whole lot of explanation. You have any questions? Brain not working? All right. So we're going to take a look at the Twitch documentation, kind of to get a general overview of everything. Make sure we fully understand everything, and then we can go from there. We can start trying to implement. We want to start from the back forward. So we're going to start with the back end first, and we're going to try and build up from there, because that's going to be our web server. That's going to be our everything. So on dev.twitch.tv, there's a docs section, and we're looking for event sub. Now on here, they show some examples. We can get an event for when a stream has gone online, a broadcaster has a new follower, a broadcaster has a new subscriber, a user is cheered in a channel, and a user has redeemed channel points. So they also go on to say that you can get a complete list of the available subscription types and the requirements on this page. This will show us the name. So this is what Twitch tells us is the event type, essentially. And this will be used inside of our code, actually, so we know exactly how to process each one, because each one's going to have a different payload from or bit of information. And as you can see, there's quite an extensive list here, so we can even get when someone updates their account. No authorization is required for this one. Some of them do require authorization, such as, I believe, subscriptions. Let's see. Channel subscribe. So yeah, we have to be able to read the broadcaster's subscription list. And with that scope, we can actually get these events. And these documentation sections for Twitch are actually pretty self-explanatory. So you have the event type, right? So channel.subscribe. This is, and it gives you a brief description when someone gets a subscriber to their channel. It does not include resubscribes though, and it does state that here. It tells you the authorization scope, and this is how most of them are laid out. It also tells you how to like the body that's required in order to request starting to get these events. And it gives you an example too. So we can see, okay, when I tell Twitch I want to know about these events, I have to tell them this is the type, this is the version, which is event sub version. So right now it's fairly new-ish, I want to say. So it's still version 1. They're still working on it. The condition is literally, at least for this one, it's only one thing. It's broadcaster underscore user underscore ID. And this is the ID number of the user you want to know about. The transport dictionary here is going to include a method, a callback, and a secret. So the method right now, they only support webhooks, which is what we're going to be doing. In the future, they do have plans for supporting WebSockets. However, I believe it's still in early testing, not even released yet. and it's a fairly new project they're working on to add on to this. But that would make it so you don't need a website or a web server. You just connect, and you could run this from anywhere rather than having to have an external public facing website. That would allow like desktop applications to be able to do it and subscribe to these events and know about them without having to expose your URL or your website. The difference between a webhook and an API. So a webhook is typically something you call. Like essentially it's loading a website, if you want to think of it that way. You go to this URL and you get information. Typically webhooks get called and they're more restful, we'll say. So you don't do anything until you're told about it. Webhooks are typically something you post to, you send information to. Where APIs, you could do both. At least that's my understanding of them. So APIs, you can request information, and APIs, you can push information, delete information, etc. Webhooks typically are the same. However, they're just slightly different because it would be, in this case, we could have one general callback URL where APIs are kind of versioned and they're also going to be different. So like the Twitch API, we would do users, like I think their version is Helix, users, and then you say what users you want to get. And then if you want to get channels, you would do channels and so on and so forth. Webhooks are more, you want to know about information. API is making information available for people to pull and push and whatnot. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Yeah, I would say so. APIs are more, you can do anything essentially. Webhooks are more notification style, I think is the best way to try and summarize. Typically when APIs are used, it's you fetching information. Webhooks are typically you being told more information, or you being told about information or things happening. So in this case, with the Twitch event sub, we want Twitch to tell us about things versus running a program or a script in the background that always checks things. So the event sub tells us when things happen versus if we were to use their API to check when things happen, we have to keep a list on our own to know, like kind of check against differences. And we're also running a script in the background that's continuously hitting a bunch of information or a bunch of different points. You're welcome. Okay, so this is just the request, right? So we tell them our secret, we tell them where we want to know about this event. And you can technically have a different URL. So you could say example.com/webhooks/callback/channel/subscribe. And that would be all of your subscription channel notifications, right? So you can have a different URL for each event type or even event user too. This is completely customizable. You could have it so in the URL, you know the user ID or something like that. When you send this to Twitch, this is where they'll send the information to. Typically, you probably want one generic one. That way you can control all of the logic there and not have to edit a bunch of different places in case something changes. The secret is going to be how this message is signed and how you can verify that it came from Twitch. Again, with this, you can technically have it so that, excuse me, every request or every notification is going to tell you when an event happens, there's a header that you receive, and I forget the name of it. We can find it in a second. But essentially, it's going to be a hashed version of the body that you're sent, as well as the type of subscription. What that means is we can use this secret. Essentially, think of it as a password. We use this secret and we try to determine, is this message really from Twitch? With that, we do get told yes or no by our own code. We verify it. The secret's not something you want to store in code. It's probably something you want to store in a config value that's not in a repository or an environment variable on the server that you're running this on, and then have the code pull from that. But once you know that the message did come from Twitch, you could process it from there. But this secret could be different for every event type. It could be different for every user. It could be different for everything. However, it's more information you have to try and store safely somewhere else. Now, having a different one per event type and user, or maybe per user, would make it so that if someone is able to crack it for one person and start sending you fake information, they're only doing it for one person. They can't do it for someone else. They have to go and retry for the secret, which would not recommend using their example one of secret with leet speak. So if we look at reference, I believe, right, is it here? Transport secret, no. Guide. Okay, so they have a section here called verify a signature, and this tells you how you can validate that this actually came from Twitch. Now, they say you have to use HMAC SHA-256, and the key is going to be the secret that you told Twitch for that specific event and that user, or whatever combo you want to use. You get an event, you determine what the secret should be if you're not using one global one. And then it just is a concatenation of the message ID header file, or header value rather, the timestamp header, and the raw bytes of the binary, the raw bytes of the request body. Whew. And then they give a quick example here that's pretty easy to follow, I would say. But you're taking the header for the message ID, concatenating it to the message timestamp, and then concatenating the body of the request that you get told about. But this body, as they noted up here, is the raw bytes. So it's not the actual text. We have to convert it to bytes if it's not already. And then the signature of it is using an HMAC SHA-256 method in this example, and then using the secret that you provided, and then the entire message that we concatenated up here. And then we also get the expected signature, and we get it as hex, and we say SHA-256 hex, and then we make sure that it equals the message signature here. Now, if it doesn't, we want to return a status code. In their example, they have 403, which is typically for permissions denied. But we can also look that up on this handy dandy website called httpstatuses.com, where a 403 actually means forbidden. So they're not allowed to post to it, or they're not allowed to send information. They give a couple notes here about making sure that the header names are lowercase or not. Like JavaScript, it converts the header names to lowercase regardless of how they were sent. So you'd want to make sure you do a dot to lowercase when looking for header names. Yeah, so I think that's a general overview. Now, I do have a GitHub repository I've made for this. It's called Ubiquitous Adventure. I saw it and I was like, it's perfect, because I don't know what it means. So if you go to github.com/bsquidward/ubiquitous, dash adventure. It's also in the description below. You can actually see the code as we're working on it, as I push changes and such. But also on here, if you look at my repositories, I recently made a basic web host here for event sub, and we're actually going to take a lot of information out of this because I don't want to type all of this again, but we're going to just use it as kind of like reference, specifically because I don't recall exactly how I made the verify signature, to be quite frank. So we're just going to copy that out and make sure we get all of that going. What we're going to be using today also for the web host version of things is going to be Flask. It's a very lightweight, fully customizable website. There's not much logic we have to put into things, so I figured Flask is a good use case for this because it's very, like I said, lightweight. It's not going to install too many dependencies, gives us full control over it, and it's something that a lot of people use. So it's kind of like a good learning ground of basic web hosting things in Python. So what I did is I made a folder on my computer, got the repository, I made a virtual environment with virtual env and then env. This is a Python module. Then we wait. There we go. So it completed creating the environment. Now we activate the environment by doing environment scripts activate. Now, as you can see at the front of our terminal, it's parentheses env, and then it shows our path. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to clear this, and what we want to do is we want to install Flask. We're going to do pip install Flask. Perfect. Now, what we're also going to do is install requests. Right? No, I don't think we need requests actually. But there is another module we want to install, which is Twitch.io. I'll bring that up here. This lets you write bots for Twitch. So you can have it kind of like a Discord bot or something like that. It just continuously runs, responds to chat messages and such. But they also implement the Twitch API. We don't want to do all of that ourselves. We want to use their version of it. So we're going to try and use that too. So we're going to do pip install Twitch.io. Perfect. So it's installed. Now with Flask, we're going to get a very minimal application here, it says. And we're just going to copy this. And we're going to make sure we got everything running or set up correctly. We're going to make a new file in our folder, and we're going to call it main.py. We're just going to paste this code in here. Save the file. And now I do know with Flask, it's kind of interesting how to run it. Let's see, where did it go? So we have to tell it how we want to run. So I'm going to make a PowerShell file called run.ps1. And essentially, this is going to tell Flask, or this is going to tell PowerShell rather, clear the host. That way we start fresh. We see exactly starting of our script. We set the environment variables so that our Flask app is main.py, and then our environment is development. And then we run it. We run the Flask module and we run this host. And we want to accept it on all all ports, or all IPs rather. So what we'll do is we'll actually do clear our terminal here, and we'll hit run, and we should see, okay, perfect. So this is our site. So it told me to go to 192.168.1.81. That's just my IP address on my network. You could do 127.0.0.1. That also works. Now, the nice thing also about this is that we can leave this running in the background, right? Because when I told it here that we're doing development mode, that will auto reload the pages as we make changes. So I can say this has been changed, and we hit save, and we come back here and we refresh, and it's already got the change there. And you can see here it detected a change, so it reloaded the entire site. So it's going to be very useful for us when we're making these changes, right? We can just have this running. We can literally run this, forget about it, and just keep the page open and keep refreshing. So now what we want to do too is we're going to want to set up kind of like a back end, I guess. We're going to set up modules in here, and we're going to set it up so that we can start getting information from Twitch, and we can start sending information to Twitch as well, where we're going to say, hey, we want this information. And because of that, just remembered we will need requests. So what we're going to do is we're going to just duplicate this tab and scripts activate. We're going to do pip install requests. And that's just because requests makes it super easy for sending API calls. And now with the API calls, and we might not actually end up using it depending on how, if the Twitch.io library has it built in, it would make it much more handier for us. We won't need requests, but it's just kind of a, just in case we need it. But we have to tell Twitch, hey, we want to know about this person's follows, this person's everything, right? We're going to make a new folder, and we're going to call this, I guess, events, right? We make a new file under there, and we can say subscribe.py. By the way, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button under the video. It's free. So once we're in here, right, we want to tell Twitch that we want to know about the events for a user. Okay. So what we're going to do is we actually want to look for, I'm losing it here, the official documentation for Twitch.io. And what we're going to do is, even though it says event sub coming soon, they still have the API implemented. And so my hope is that they're already going to have a way for us to say, we want to subscribe to this. We don't want to subscribe to this, right? So if we look at the Twitch documentation, we got a reference. Oh, subscription types. Sorry. We're going to copy the name of one of these, and we're just going to search this repository for a channel update. It's probably not what I want, though. Yeah. Okay. We'll look at Twitch API. And we're going to look at reference. We're going to say event sub, create event sub subscription, right? So we're going to look for this and hope we can find it. Pet subscriptions, webhook subscriptions. This kind of works, or it's close enough at least. Let's look at the client here. No. If we search for create, wonder if they just don't have it. That'd be interesting. But maybe they're just not doing anything with event sub. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just do it ourselves. And this is going to be fun. So we're going to do import requests. We're also going to import OS because for this project, I'm going to do environment variables for everything. So if we come back to here, where I made this already as like a proof of concept before I even got to this part of streaming all of this, is what I want to do. And we're gonna make this as modular as possible, right? So we're gonna copy all of this and this. I realize this is a lot of copy paste. I'll walk you through it. Essentially, this is the subscription URL. So this is the URL we're sending the gets, the posts, the puts, everything. This is where we're telling Twitch about subscriptions. So when we want to create a new subscription, we use this URL. We want to find out what subscriptions we have, we use this URL. When we want to delete subscriptions, we use this URL. Okay. So now what I really want to do actually too, and we're going to rename this from events actually, and we're going to call this methods, right? This is where we're going to break everything out. So we're going to call a new file. I'm going to say twitch.py. Maybe twitch auth. We'll call it Twitch. And what we're going to do is we're going to import this, because again, we're going to use environment variables for everything. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. We're going to take all of this stuff that I just copied essentially, and we're going to take it out of here. And the reason for that is we want to make this as interchangeable as possible, right? So if we go, I'm missing imports. Did it just import HMAC? Yeah, I think so. HMAC. Yeah. We actually don't need Flask, but we're going to import OS again. So we're importing HMAC, hashlib, requests, and JSON. And the reason we do this is because we want to have it so that we can actually validate this information we're getting from Twitch. So with this URL, we're just kind of setting it as a static, right? So it's almost never going to change unless they change their API, in which case we have to come revisit all of this anyways. This is going to be the authorization body. So we're going to send them information and we're going to tell them, hey, this is our client ID. This is our secret. We want to get a credential. And the reason we need to get a credential is so that we can validate all of our requests. We're going to know, we want to be able to tell Twitch, hey, we're requesting this on behalf of this application. And then when people authorize the application is when it becomes free for us to subscribe to events for them. So we have to kind of keep all of that in sync, right? So we're going to go up here. We're going to say client ID equals, I think it's os.byron.get. And we want to get, what do we want to call this? Twitch client ID. And yeah, we don't want to default. We want it to fail if it can't find it, right? And we're going to do the same thing for client secret. All right, so now we have our ID and our secret, which right now won't do anything because I don't have those environment variables set up right now. However, when we do, these will get populated from our environment variables. Now on Windows, you do that by searching your start menu for environment variables, and you go to environment variables. You make them down here in the bottom system variables part, and you'll be good. So what we want to do is we're going to say define get authorization, right? And we're going to indent all of this. And we're going to bring this up because now what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, this is the body. This is the information we're sending to Twitch. We send it with requests. And we could probably do this with the Twitch lib or the Twitch.io library. But it's kind of good to see it at the same time of what it's going to look like. Now, from there, we have the response and we want to get the keys, or I don't know why I called it keys. We'll call it auth response JSON instead. So it's a little bit more descriptive. Oh. And with requests, you get the entire request. You get the status code, you get everything from there when you post or get or delete or anything like that. What we want to do is we want to call the built-in function for requests called JSON. What this does is it converts the entire body of the request or the information that you have in that request response to JSON. And that makes it so we can actually, and when I say JSON, it converts it to a dictionary in Python so that we can easily parse it here, for example, where we have auth response JSON access token, right? And so what we want to do is we're actually going to try and see if we can define. We need a place to store this access token because once you have 30 of them generated, or 25, I think it is. I don't know if it's documented anywhere. It's just what I've picked up on with developer discords in discussion. The token, when you have 25 of them, it starts invalidating the first one when you request the 26th. So it starts rotating them with a maximum of 25 being active. So we need a way to kind of try and store this. We could try to use an environment variable if we wanted, which actually is not a bad idea, because then we can also do a check where we could say get authorization. If it's not set, we set it. If it is set, we use it. But we also have to worry about kind of like some timing issues, because if it's timed incorrectly, we could end up using an expired token. We have to be able to kind of validate that. So in here with get authorization, we could try and validate the authorization code just by doing a request and seeing if it works or not. So we'll probably end up doing that. Let's do auth. We'll just call this access token, actually. We'll call it, well, no, we don't want to set it there. What we're gonna do, we're gonna go here, we're gonna call this access token within our function. Oh, it's not accessible outside of this, right? And we can always just continuously call this method and it refreshes every time. Because with functions, any variables you define within the function in Python, I believe, get refreshed immediately. Whereas if you define it here, once you import the file, it's set until you set it to something else. It's just, that's what it is. It's basically static at that point. So we kind of want it to be a little more adaptive, right? In case we have to reset it on a different thread or something. We want this to check on the next call that it gets for authorization. So we're going to get the access token and we're going to say if access token, there we go. I actually don't remember how to check if Python is null or empty. That's it. Just if not, okay. So if not, maybe we should do if access token. That way, if it's set, we return access token, right? If it's not set is when we want to do the response here, right? So we get this, and I'm going to copy this out and copy this. We're going to say, okay, now we want os.environment.set. Or do I have to do this? Twitch client access token. We need to rename it here too, so that we're pulling the right one. So we're going to set this to the auth response access token. Now, let's see. Python set OS variable. Perfect. So I did this correctly. I like validating or verifying that I did things correctly. I apologize. And I also like pull quotes, but okay. So now that we've set this, right? My next thought is that we're going to need a function to get these headers, just so that we have one central place to do it. We're going to do def get auth headers, or get headers rather. Oh, C# breaking in. And we're just going to assemble the headers, right? And what we're going to do is, instead of auth response, we're going to call get authorization. Excuse me. Actually, we're going to call this get access token and rename this function. And then we're going to return headers. So we're going to delete the header assembly here. And now that we've set the set environment variable, we can also do environ, we can call it Twitch access token expiration. No, we want it to be a bit more adaptive. So we don't really want to care about the expiration time. We want to care about more than that. We want to care that a request failed, then we refresh our authorization and attempt the request again. So we don't want to have like a timed thing, because if for whatever reason the authorization token or the access token gets invalidated by Twitch, we want to request a new one. Even if the other one had time left on it, it's been flagged invalid, so we're rewriting it, we're overwriting it, we're using a new one. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to return the OS Twitch access token. We're actually going to do .get, because that'll return null, I believe, which will start, well, yeah, we'll just leave it like that for now. Okay, so we've got this URL here where we're posting, we're getting credentials, we're getting the response, getting this. We are able to assemble the headers, and we have this here for verifying the event sub signatures. Now, this is erroring out on us because what we want to do is we actually want to copy that. And we're just going to use environment variables for this as well. But we're going to call it Twitch event sub secret. We're going to put that in our environment variable. So now I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm just going to set these up so we can test this. I'm going to try and not put this on stream because that would be bad. Okay. So let's grab client ID and I'm going to go to dev.twitch.tv. And that's where you actually, in the top right, you could click your console, go to applications if you're logged in, and go from there. Now, I already have one that's created for kind of testing event sub stuff. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm just going to create a new one for this project. YouTube event sub project. And we have to add in a redirect URL. However, localhost works as without needing HTTPS. Everything else does require HTTPS. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to call this other. Well, other, or we'll call it website integration category, because that's technically what it's going to end up being. So now I have my client ID. Put that as an environment variable. We're going to set our secret for client secret. Okay. And then we're going to grab this environment variable, set this. And for this, I'm going to go to random.org. And we're going to do, I guess, strings. Uppercase, lowercase. And I'm going to say I want it to be 20 characters long. I'm just going to pick a random one in there. Click OK, click OK. All right. Now, the only one I don't know about defining and having ready is this Twitch access token. What that's going to do is going to essentially just be a placeholder. I don't know if I have to set that or if it will be within the context of the script running, but let's go ahead and do this. What we're going to do is we're going to say import or from methods, from methods, import Twitch, right? And we're going to, we'll return the client ID of the program I just created. So we're going to do Twitch that client ID, right? Now, when we refresh this page, do I not have it open still? I guess I closed it. Interesting. There we go. So it's set to none. So what that tells me is this just didn't refresh, because environment variables, you have to reset everything. So we're going to end that and we're actually going to exit out, and then we will make a new PowerShell. What is this called? Ubiquitous. Yeah. Run. And still not getting it. Interesting. Okay. So I wonder, let's try this. Import OS. And if we say we want to get this, yeah, I got nothing. Interesting. Okay. Maybe I don't want get. I want to use the actual like dictionary references just so that if it fails, it knows it failed immediately. Right? It'll fail the import, which means it'll fail everything else. But I don't know why I can't get that environment variable. So we're gonna go here, Python environment variables, read. Woo, spelling. Local environment variables. Well, that lets us use a .env file. That's kind of nice. But that's not what we're looking for right now. Okay. So do I just have to restart all of this and open a new terminal? Excuse me. Oh, you know what? Maybe this environment's clearing out the variables, right? Oh no, I just had to fully restart the console. Okay. So we run this and now we have our client ID. So now we can actually test these requests, right? And so we can make sure in here, if we say hello world for the root folder, what we can do is we can say access token. We're not actually going to print this out because that's dangerous. But we're going to say equals which dot get access token, right? We're gonna say if true. I forget how you do inline ifs. But we'll just do this. Do access token dot token equals true. No else. I'll say got token equals false. We're gonna say got token dot token. And we got a token. Cool. Now we want to try and use that to actually fetch something, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at Twitch's API and we're gonna say get user. Just a test. And this URL endpoint is actually going to be Twitch TV Helix users. So if we come back into Visual Studio Code, we can go, okay, now we want to import requests. And since we know we got a token, that's fine. What we're going to do now, though, is we're going to say response equals request dot get. Say URL this, not a colon. And then we're gonna say headers equals access headers. Actually, we'll say Twitch dot get headers. Okay. And we're gonna also want params equals params. We're gonna call params equals a dictionary. Say login, be Squidward, and then we're gonna say response JSON equals response.json. And then we'll call this response ID, I believe. user ID for RB Squidward. And this returns this payload here. So yeah, ID. We'll save that. Make sure we could get information. No. Okay. So then the other thing about using Flask in environment, in development mode, is we can actually see the stack trace here that it blew up on. And right away, I know what I did wrong because I referenced response instead of response JSON. And if we refresh this, now we have another error, which is fine. It says key error ID is wrong. So that's because for our data, it's data and then ID. And that's because this can return multiple results or multiple users, right? So we're going to say data, then we're going to grab the first one and then try and get 0, right? Actually, we're going to want single quotes here. And let's refresh. Perfect. So we got the user ID. And so now we know our API calls are actually working. What I need to make sure of now, though, is if the environment variables are getting set for the access token, which would be quite interesting. And it might just be for this console that's being run, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new console really quickly and just make sure that it's getting set. So what it's doing is it is setting the environment variable for this in the script that it's running and going from there. So now we just need a way to know if an access token is set, right? We need to make sure that it's actually valid. Otherwise, generate a new one anyways, set it. That way everything else is using the new one, right? So what we need to do is we need to see just a quick, I think there's one even just validating requests. No, maybe this will tell us how to validate that a token is active. This looks like it's just for bearer tokens, which are on behalf of users, versus what we're using is a, did it? No, it's gonna be a, what is a bearer token? Huh. Learn something new. All right, so we just go to validate and we say authorization is this, and it'll tell us if it's good or not. So I am going. What am I going to do? Because I don't want to. Let's see. Let's just do another function here. We're going to call this define validate auth. We're going to call this access token. Let's say validate body equals this. Now the Twitch specifications actually doesn't say we need a body. We just need to get this with an authorization header. So we'll call this validate headers, right? We're going to call this authorization. Bearer. And then access token. I'm going to format this string. And then we're going to do response equals request dot get URL equals this. Headers equals validate headers. And we're going to say response JSON equals response dot JSON. And then now when we do it, we get the client ID it belongs to, the login, the user ID, and the expiration time, and the scopes. Now, because this is a OAuth bearer token, I don't know how that'll work for this. So let's just try and say print response JSON. This doesn't get any, there's no like special data or anything it looks like either. So we can just reference these directly. So we're going to say client ID, right? We're just going to call client ID. And then what we're going to do too is we're going to try, all of this, and then we're going to return true. Catch, is it catch or else? Return false. I don't want the semicolon. I think it's catch, isn't it? It's been a while. Try catch Python. Oh, except. Okay. So we will return false if it doesn't work and say there's an error, right? And we can also do this. You just move this in here. Well, nah, it's not needed. It's not part of the try part. So we're going to save this. We refreshed our code. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to, I'm actually going to print response dot body on content. And I'm going to run this on the side just to make sure everything is set correctly. Actually, I don't know if I have to actually run this on the side, but do this. From methods, import Twitch. We'll do this. So now we import the Twitch methods, right? We're going to say, okay, access token equals Twitch dot get access token. Now we have an access token. So now we need to Twitch dot validate auth access token. Perfect. So no scopes. We got a client ID and we got an expiration time. And we return true because it's successful, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So now I need to know what it's like when that fails, right? So if you are authenticated, a successful response indicates that your access token is valid. Okay. So then let's do Python requests response. Actually status code. We want to make sure that everything's okay, which I believe is actually as part of this, where it's probably dot okay. Yeah. All right. So we can just do this. We can copy this part, right? And what we're gonna do is we're just going to return if the response status code equals request codes okay. I think I have to exit from methods, import Twitch, get access token, Twitch dot validate auth access token. Cool. So it did return it perfectly. What we could also do too is we can bring this response JSON equals response.json. And we can say and response JSON client. We want to make sure it's actually for this client ID equals client ID, right? We want to make sure it's the one we're actually running for. So from methods, import Twitch. And then we're going to say access token equals Twitch dot get access token. Holy typing, I swear. Twitch dot validate auth access token. Cool. So it is still returning true. Perfect. Which means it's for that client ID that we're currently running with, right? So now we have our headers. We are able to validate authentication or authorization. What we can do is, instead of just returning the access token here, well, so a couple thoughts here. This could just be purely returning it, not caring if we need a new one. However, if that's the case, we should just return this regardless of whether or not it's set and have another one that sets it. I think that's what we're going to do. Is we're going to take this out or make a new function, def generate access token. And we're going to actually set it, generate it. This is going to overwrite everything, right? So the way we're going to want to use this is by using get access token. This is going to be our main method. And it's going to check, is it set? Yes. If not, generate it, then return it. So we're going to just say return, generate access token. But we also want to do this where we validate auth access token, right? We're going to say auth valid equals this. It's going to be a true false, right? So if not auth valid, generate access token, return. And then we're going to return access token if it is valid, or just in general, right? And actually what we can do is, if we want to guarantee that it's correct, we're going to return only if it's valid. Otherwise, we're going to return generating a new access token. And this should take care of it being validated, right? However, this part could get a little chatty, could get a little rate limited. I don't know if it's rate limited. Let's see. Form making which perform mutations, blah, blah, blah. Conducts audits if we discover an application is not revalidating access tokens. I actually don't know. If it is rate limited, because we need to be careful about that, right? Well, we're also only going to be getting an access token when we need it. Like when we're subscribing someone to events, we're going to get it once, then loop through the events and start retrieving them and like subscribing or deleting and so on and so forth. But that could potentially be a lot of requests at once. Like if you're thinking for scale, we want to make sure we're not running validate auth too often. So we might have to set another environment variable that's last run. We want to make sure it hasn't run in the last 30 minutes. And if it has, it'll run it and immediately set the time. So hopefully not too many requests start validating at the same time. But if they are, it's like a quick burst in a couple seconds, and then that's it. And we don't hit a rate limit. So now, with that thought in mind, right, we need to do last run equals os.environ.get access token last validated. This is actually the wrong method. We need to put it here. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to check, okay, if last run is set, right? Well, see, now if we have this timed thing, we still have to be able to override generating a token, which we could still do. Right? If we get an authorization error on our requests later, we generate a token. I think that's what we'll do. We'll try and make a generic requests class or function, and then get that going. So we might not need to validate auth at all. And we can just assume it works, right? Oh. So if an access token is set, we return it. Otherwise, we'll generate a new access token. Actually, we can simplify this more. Never mind. Don't want to do that. So we set the access token here. Get a token here by generating it. Validate the authorization. Don't want to do that anymore, right? We want to limit the requests we're sending out as much as possible. And in fact, why am I doing this all this way? Let's go Twitch.io Python. We want to go to their documentation. We want to go to client reference and do off. Oh, they do have it here. Okay. And everybody handles all this too. Wow. Okay. Okay. Let's go to their documentation and see if we can find where this is. Might have to just start reverse engineering things. Come on. I'm gonna go with a no. So we're gonna import Twitch.io. Okay, and this already does all the imports for us, it looks like. Client, user, channel, chatter, enums, errors, message, thread, models, rewards. Looking for HTTP. We'll keep doing it the way we're doing it right now. Okay, so we've got a token. We're able to make these requests now that we want. So now we can start telling Twitch, hey, we want to subscribe to these events. So we won't save this subscribe file. We'll actually rename it. Let's call it events? No. Subscribe. We'll keep it as subscribe actually. Import request. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a, well, we can either have a class or we can have a bunch of methods. So what this could be is this could be define subscribe user. Oh, fine. Subscribe user. I get a user ID. Right? We come in here and we go, okay. Now we want to start subscribing them to a bunch of stuff. And so to do that, how do we want to do that? We want to do that by, we'll make a generic requester here. So define send Twitch request. We're gonna say we want the URL, the method, the body. Right? Yeah. And we're gonna say, okay. Now we're gonna get headers equals get auth. No, get headers. Is that really what I called it? Get auth headers. There we go. So now that we have the headers, we can try and make a request. So we could try response equals request dot request method equals method URL equals URL body equals body. And then we return response. JSON. Accept. What is it? Exception as E. Throw. I'll just throw. Raise. E. Oh, we also want to include our headers here. Headers. Okay, so we're making a request, right? Actually, let's call this headers equals get auth headers as default. I don't know how that'll work out. Nah. So what we'll do is we'll say if not headers equals auth headers. Okay, so headers can be none. Method we can define a default of as well equals get. And then we can say instead of URL, let's use endpoint. Then we're gonna say, okay, URL equals Twitch TV. Most of them are gonna be like API Twitch TV. API.twitch.tv/helix, right? I'll call this, we'll say endpoint. Oh, endpoint. We also want parameters. Params. We'll do that. Okay. This is gonna fail, this line right here. We need to find something to do with the exception. And what we can do is we can actually print the exception. And then in subscribe, we could say, okay, from methods import Twitch. And then we say Twitch dot send request. And the endpoint is actually going to be Twitch dot event subscription. Actually, we just call this event sub endpoint now, right? The endpoint for all things event sub. Perfect. So that's the URL for the endpoint. Sorry, I had to sneeze. So now we're also going to want to set the method equal to post. This is where we have to reference the page or the documentation, right? We're gonna go to reference. Actually, we're gonna go to guide. I'm gonna say example, we call post to this. Must be HTTPS, callback. Perfect. So this is the example, right? What we're gonna do, we're gonna do this. We're gonna set the secret to always be Twitch.event subsecret. And then we're going to say now it's very odd how we're going to want to do this, because we want all of these to get sent regardless, right? We want to send for each one regardless of how anything else is set up, if that makes sense. What we're looking to do essentially is subscribe to all the events we can once a user is scoped. And actually, unfortunately, I got rid of it. We could have validated access tokens to get the scopes that were allowed and then check for that. So let's do that. Let's recreate this. Validate off access token. let's go back here. We're sending it to this URL. So we're not going to use the new thing we created because it's going to be just API requests. What we are going to do though is we're going to say request.get URL equals this, headers equals headers. Okay. I'm going to say headers equals dictionary authorization bearer access token. We'll format that. So now we got this, right? We're going to say, okay, return response this response JSON equals response dot JSON return response that status code equals request dot status codes dot OK and response JSON client ID equals client ID. Okay, we're gonna validate the authorization code that we get. Now the part I need to figure out is we want it to validate, right? But we want to know the scopes, right? We want to get the body, the JSON of this. So we're going to return response JSON if else return false. Right? Let's break this out. If and client ID equals that, else return. Actually, we don't want an else. We just want to return false if this isn't true. Actually, I want to make this .get from the dictionary, because if it's none and not set, I don't want it to throw an error. I want it to just, it won't succeed validation, right? So now we have the response JSON. What we could do is their example shows scopes. So now we need to find a way to map a scope or scopes to event subs. Not Twitch API, description types. So it looks like one scope equals one type, right? But also we need to keep in mind, okay, which ones are public? Because just because these require this or say this, right? When someone follows a channel, we don't need authorization for that. In fact, if we search for this up top, actually, I was looking at this wrong, sorry. So channel update requires no authorization, so it's public, right? Now, if we come through here, we look through authorizations really quickly. Must have channel read subscription scope for subscribe. Subscription end must have read for subscriptions. Gift requires subscriptions. Message requires subscriptions, which this is a resub, I believe. Since a resubscription, yeah. For cheer requires bits read. So we need a way to define all of this, right? We need a way to store all of this and save all this and go from there. So let's define get scope for let's say get scopes for now what's going to be kicking all of this off actually is going to be Twitch telling us someone authorized. So I wonder, because that is an event that we get from event sub. So user authorization grant. Okay. So we request this. You see the client the condition for this one is different than most others. So the condition is going to be on the client ID, not on a user. So we'll at least be using one cost for our event subs. So this is an example of when someone authorizes our token, right? And all we get is client ID, user ID, login, username. It doesn't look like it tells us our scopes. Yeah. I'm not seeing telling us our scopes. So get scopes authorized to client ID for user Twitch. So I guess we're gonna have to do this when the user logs in, validating the scopes and sending the requests instead of when they authorize without them being on the site, so we can start subscribing to them. We want to wait till they come back because otherwise we can't know the scopes. So we're gonna get scopes for event sub or event, right? And we're gonna say event name. So we're gonna call this scopes. We're gonna make it a dictionary. And this is going to be a lot of work. So let's do it. Subscription types. Actually, it's not gonna be that too much work. Copy all of this. Sublime text. That didn't format nearly as nicely as I wanted it to. Oh. By the way, the text editor I'm using is Sublime Text, and I'm selecting multiple lines like this where I click by holding Control, and then you're able to edit multiple lines at once. So I'm selecting right now, like before I selected at the end of these event names. Now I'm selecting in front of them so that we can just delete what's in front of them and be left with just our event names. And when I highlight like this, I'm going through and doing a quick glance, making sure that I'm not highlighting something that I'm going to have to do or add back. Like for example, line 12, I had accidentally selected between the V and the E. So I deleted the E when I deleted the end of the lines. So I just had to go back and put the E at the end of channel.moderator.remove. Okay. And we're going to put these in double quotes. Oh. And then we're going to say equals a list. And for now, we're just going to say they're all public, right? And then at the end of each one, we're going to have to put a comma because it's going to be a Python dictionary. Now we come in here. Boom. We have our dictionary with scopes. All of them are defined. Right now, it is saying that all of them are public. However, not necessarily the case, right? We know that, and we know it might require multiple scopes, which is why we make this a list. Okay. So now I can go in, I can close this, close Sublime Text. Hold on 1 second. Interesting. Okay. So now we need to go through and we go one at a time and grab the scopes required. So channel update, nothing. Perfect. Channel follow, nothing. Perfect. Channel subscribe, channel read subscriptions. So we're going to look for channel.subscribe. We're going to go channel subscribe. We're going to replace public with that. We also know anything with subscription when we saw it earlier, also going to require that. So we're going to come back. We're just going to double check. Subscription end requires subscriptions. Subscription end subscriptions. And this is going to be really quick. So we're going to do subscription gift is going to be subscriptions. Gift and message should also be subscriptions. Perfect. We're also going to move on next to bits read, or when people cheer. When people raid is public. Perfect. Channel ban, we need to have moderate. So channel ban and unban, I'm assuming, are going to be moderate. Let's make sure unban also moderate. When a moderator is added, moderation read. So same thing for remove, I'm going to assume. Remove is also moderation read. Now, when people they're adding channel point rewards, we must have either read redemptions or manage redemptions. Okay, so we're going to put that in there. And again, this is why we have the list, right? Is in case people give us manage, which we actually don't want. If we have manage, does that mean we have read by default? Maybe I could just leave this as read. We're not going to ask people for managing. We're going to ask them for reading. Like at the most, right? So we'll leave that. Copy this. Anything with these rewards, I'm going to assume is the same. It's going to be either or. So we're going to look for read, 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 read. Reward, add, update, remove, redemption. So this is custom reward remove. Oh, this is actually different. Okay. So the points custom reward redemption ad is, oh, it's not different. Interesting. Okay. And I'll read redemptions. Yep. Next one, poll begin. Okay, so we're gonna only, again, we're only doing read, right? So we're gonna do poll begins, progress, and end. Just gonna make sure progress, end. Then we're gonna do predictions begin, predictions progress, predictions lock, prediction end. Okay. Perfect. Drop entitlement grant. Okay, so this one is special. So we might skip this for now. Come back. Because the next one we have is channel hype begin. Authorization must have channel read hype train. And we're also going to come back to this one. So anything, oh, that's goals. We're looking for hype train. Okay, so hype train progress, read, hype train end, read, drop entitlement grant. Okay, so this one is special. And this one is special because it's only usable by people who own games and have been authorized by Twitch to use them. What this is going to do is it fires an event every time someone's given a drop. And it could be multiple people in one event. Now, because that's not our target audience, we're not going to actually even include it. So we're going to take out drop entitlement grant. We're going to move down. Extension bits transaction create. So this is also the same thing when a new transaction is created for a Twitch extension. Now, the client ID must match the extension client ID. In this case, we're not running an extension, so we're going to take that one out too. Yeah. Now, goal subscriptions is new. So about subscribing, see events come. They messed up the formatting on this, it looks like, but all three of these, we're gonna do requires read goals, requires read goals, requires read goals. Okay, perfect. So next we have our stream ones. These are public. Stream online, stream offline are public. Perfect. User subscriptions. So this is the authorization grant, and this is actually going to be not something we're going to be wanting a scope for, right? We're not going to want to know, because these are going to be specific to our program or our application. So we're going to be handling those on our own, not going through the grants here, trying to subscribe people to them. We're going to subscribe our application to it once. So if we scroll down, authorization grant, authorization revoke. Now, users update. We need to know if we want. We don't necessarily need this either. It's public. We subscribe to that user, and as long as they're authorized in our app and with our client ID, it's a free event. And we don't necessarily want their email, right? The less information we need from them, the better. The less scopes we need from them, much better. So we're just going to leave that to public. And we're not going to look for email address, okay? So now with the event name, what we're going to do is we're going to return scopes dot get event name with the default of public. Okay. And what that means is technically we could go through here and we can delete these that are all public only. That way we're only listing the ones that are special, right? Now, I'm not going to do that because I want to leave this here. So in the event that they add new ones, we're going to default to public, but everything we know about at this moment, we're going to say, okay, this is what we know the permissions to be at this time, right? So we're going to get scopes for events. And actually, what we could do is we're going to take this, we're going to say, we're going to cut this. Actually, go here, right? And we're going to say return event scopes dot get. We're going to say def get event types. Return event scopes dot, I think it's keys, right? And actually what we're going to want to do, def get event. I think just events will work. Turn events. Events. Right? Because if I take this, I come in here, Python events.keys. Yeah. Dot distinct. Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay. But that means now we have all of our events here. We can list and we get the scopes too. But if we want just a specific scope, we could just say, okay, we want to get events and for this specific event name, right? Easy. And the default is going to be public here. So that if this doesn't have any, we can just return it. And what we'll do is get defined events types. This is just going to give us our keys, which is going to be the channel.update, channel.follow, etc. So now that we have all of that defined, right? We need to kind of make this easier on ourselves when subscribing for events. Now, when we send a Twitch request, right, we're already doing a try catch here. And right now I'm just printing the error because I want to see what happens. What I want to do is I want to copy paste this a lot. Quite frank, I'm going to copy paste this a lot. So we want to get one that works. And then we go from there. So what we're doing, right, is this is the type. What I'm going to do is actually we're going to do get subscription body, user ID, and type, right? However, there are events, as you see here, channel follow is broadcaster user ID. Some of these require broadcaster ID. Some of these require user ID. Sorry, broadcaster user ID or user ID. So what we need to do is we need to know which ones are going to be using broadcaster user ID, right? And so what we could do is we could search for user ID. Okay, and this is returning a lot of not what I want. Now, a lot of these are channel based, right? And so what we're going to need is we need a way to determine which ones are user based and which ones are channel based. Is it channel based? We use broadcaster user ID. And for user based, we use user ID. What we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to call this a, we're just going to call it body equals this. Indent this appropriately. And we're going to do a format here, user ID. And we're going to do a format here of type. And we're going to call this actually event type. Then we return, actually, no, we just return this. Right? Because that's it. That's wham bam. Now, the issue, and what we could do, is we could come in here and we could say, we could have this as like a tuple. But it's not really going to help, is it? Okay, let's do this. We're going to do a dictionary within a dictionary. Alt in this? Ah, it is. So in Visual Studio Code, it is Alt. Then you click where you want to put your cursor. And that'll allow you to edit multiple lines. Okay, we're gonna make this a dictionary. Okay. We're gonna call this scopes. Oh, scopes is that, right? But we also want to know, we're gonna call it type. We're gonna call this user. Comma this, back one down, that, there we go. And that messed up this last line, that's fine. Perfect. Event name. Scopes. Okay. The event types is going to be just fine. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to say event name. Event name. We'll leave that as is. Okay. Event name equals none. And then what we'll do, we'll come down here and we'll say if event name turn events dot get. Actually, can I just return events dot get event name events? Just return everything? Oh my god, I haven't done anything here. Initial commit. So what I'm doing right now, actually leave that. Is we're just gonna initial commit all this here, subscribe. We're still working on that. We're still working on Twitch too. This should be good enough though for us to commit. Subscribe, not so much. Okay, we're just gonna commit all this. And what I'll do too is we will say this. We will push it to GitHub so you guys can see it. Okay, so now that we got this going, right? We have the event type here. I'm wondering if we could just get the event, right? Because we get event name and it just returns the event. Well, we have the event type here. So we could say event info equals twitch.get event. Is it get events? Yeah. And then we put event type, right? And then we get in here, we go how do we want to do this? Because what we could do a format, you can say this, say podcaster if event info equals type equals podcaster, else user ID, and assume everything's user unless we specify broadcaster, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So since this is public, actually, so channel is going to be broadcaster, broadcaster, broadcaster. Most of these are going to be pretty self-explanatory, I feel like the raid, the ban. And again, we could come in and we can modify this later. But most of these are going to actually be broadcaster. Except for user update. So everything is broadcaster except for user update. Okay. Maybe I want to make the default broadcaster. So if I say user, okay. So it's going to do user ID if the event info is user. Otherwise, it's going to assume broadcaster user ID. Yeah, I think that's good. Now, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to loop through. In a minute, we're going to say body equals get subscription body. User ID, event type, or event name, right? And so in here, we're going to do for event and twitch.get events. Body equals get subscription body, user ID. I'm going to say event Actually, I want to get event types. Right. Because then we're doing this. We're subscribing the user to everything. Okay. So now, what did I change here? Oh. Change type to match what it should be for subscription. Okay. So now if we go to our main page, right? We go here on load. Let's actually try. Now that we got this response, right? I can get my own ID. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to say for user in response JSON data, right? We're going to say Twitch dot no subscribe user. This should be part of Twitch, right? Yeah, this should be part of Twitch. Don't save, delete. Yeah, right. Twitch dot subscribe user ID. Okay. So now when we subscribe the user, we want to post to the endpoint. And we're going to post this body, which we get here. I think that should work. Right? Let's find out. So this reloaded. See how badly this breaks. Oh my. Methods.twitch has no attribute get headers. Yeah. Main.py. Oh yeah. I renamed it. Cool. Reloaded. Refreshed. Type error. In subscribe user. Twitch request. One required positional argument params. Oh. Well, it's not required. I don't want it to be required. Equals none. Equals none. There we go. Hey, okay. So, unexpected keyword argument body. Okay. West data. This method. Method. So now with this, how do I send, let's see, Python request, post body. Post URL, that's data. I probably wanted to specify it as JSON. Well, it's taking a while to load. That's good. And there was no errors. So my assumption is that that worked. Now what we need to do is we need to make a new endpoint here really quickly. We're going to say app.route list, right? Define list subscriptions. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to do response equals request get URL. Well, no. We can still use response, right? We're going to do twitch dot send twitch request. We're going to call it the endpoint. It's going to be twitch endpoint twitch dot endpoint. I think that's it. And then the response, I believe, is already auto turned into JSON. Yeah. So I could say return response JSON dot dumps. Is it dumps though? Print ready JSON Python. There's a lot of what I do is Google dumps parsed indent for sort keys true. Perfect. I don't want to type all of that. Response. Go. So now we go here. Say list. That didn't print it at all. Flask return JSON response pretty. Flask.jsonify. Okay. Hey, all right. So here is everything we subscribe to from Twitch, right? We can see we have this whole page here. This is total cost is 0 because I'm sending it as myself. I've already authorized this at some point, I'm sure. Well, actually, it's my own token, right? So we can see total, I have 5 subscriptions. The max total cost is 10,000. The total cost right now is 0. Now, if I do someone who doesn't utilize this, right? Who I've never touched this for before, we can also do login. And this is the nice thing too, by the way, is we can actually send this to, wait, can I just use my send request here? I totally can. Hell yeah. All right. Twitch.send Twitch request. We're just gonna call it users. This is endpoint. Okay. So now, right, because she was in here earlier, wonderful gal. Binary digit. Okay. Now, because this has 5, right? There's 5 things I'm requested to. My assumption is that there's not going to be any errors. This will just go up to 5, the total cost. Now, what I'm worried about is I see users update, stream offline, stream online, channel follow, and actually, this is okay. Because what I'm getting, actually what I should do, is if we say response JSON equals this, return the response JSON, but because we are in here, we want to print the response JSON too. Okay. So now let's go here. Once this loads, dictionary object has no attribute JSON. Oh, right. Because now we just have response. Yeah. It's actually going to subscribe binary digit to me. For the, well, not subscriber to me, it's going to subscribe the application to see events. Now, if we go to /list, we have this beautiful list here. We see total 10, total cost 5. Now, what happened is we're seeing all of this, right? We're seeing a lot of forbiddens, missing proper authorization, missing proper authorization. A lot of these probably are for a mixture of binary and myself. Now, the reason this is forbidden and it's getting a 403 and missing proper authorization is okay, actually. Now, what we need to do is we need to do checks for that, right? So what we need to do is we come in here and we say, if response JSON dot get error, right? Because that's what it is, it's error. We're going to print response JSON dot get. We're going to say message. Okay. Now what this is going to do is going to print the message saying it's not able to do that, right? But we want to format this string so we can kind of get more information out of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we want to print a the endpoint, right? Endpoint, and then the message. Okay. We don't want to print the response JSON anymore. We want to just know the endpoint and maybe the params, right? So let's go ahead and save that. Refresh. We'll go back to the home page, refresh this. We should watch this. Okay. No parameters. However, we are sending a body, right? So what I'm going to do, if this and the endpoint equals event sub endpoint, we can say body conditions. We can get that, right? So we save this, refresh. An untyped object is not scriptable for user and response data. Huh? Return none. No. Line 15. For user and response data. Okay. So it's not getting. I have to do a double and. condition. Ah. No? Or user and response data. Why you do this? Okay, and also we're gonna want response. We're gonna want a filter. We'll fix that in a second. We can't loop through the data for some reason. We're not getting data, right? We're printing exceptions. Let's print response JSON again. Unsupported or and main Flask is not subscriptable. Yeah, I know that. So why you do this? I guess the real question is, why is it none? Right? Because print trims. Oh. It's still failing. So what did I change? Oh, maybe that's what it is. No? So that did it. Okay. So then what I need is I need to say if I get error and oh my goodness, Webhooks, that works. Yeah. So error conflict. Okay. So now, right? that conflict is coming from somewhere. And actually, there's a nice utility, ice cream, I believe, that was meant for actually debugging these things. Well, I'm printing it anyways, right? So if I say no on this, I shouldn't get any more of those conflicts in here, right? Ooh, here we go. Also, from broadcaster user ID failed on the required one if tag. Okay. So I need to know the type. Channel raid needs to be to user ID. So so broadcaster here, we're gonna say broadcaster ID, user ID. Kyle. Broadcaster. Broadcaster ID. We're gonna come down to, what was it? User ID. And then for raid, right? So for raids, because it's telling us it's not working. So for raids, we need to know, we could provide from, however, right now, we just want to know about the person we're logged in as. So we're going to say raid is to, and then this actually makes it easier, where we come in here and we say event info type, right? Good. That should get rid of this channel raid error. And probably, well, it'll probably make it a permissions issue. Actually, raid is public, so should be okay. Now, we're missing authorization for these, which is fine. What we are gonna do is, because we now know the error we were getting, now we want to know, okay, error type equals response JSON error, because we've already validated that it's there, right? We should be able to do this no problem. And then we need to know, okay, what is it, error message? So now need to know, okay, it's forbidden, status, message. Okay. I could have just checked here, huh? Error message. All right, and then we don't want to print the response JSON, right? We only want to know about errors. We only want to know about other things. For instance, we could raise E. Should rethrow the error. So missing proper authorization, missing proper authorization. Okay. So now, right, that's all we're getting, which is fine. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add in here. So can I do? I think it's that, right? Tabs. Okay, we're gonna add in the body. Somehow I want to know. Actually, we just do conditions, right? So condition. And then we got tabs. Okay. Means it looks prettier, I guess. I mean, it formats it better. Wonder if I could do condition 0. No. Get first dictionary value. Python. List that values 0. Okay. List the values 0. Okay. Let's actually take this out. We're going to say condition ID, condition type. So we're going to do keys 0, and then we're going to say this. We're not going to do 0 actually. We're going to do this and then condition type, right? And then we're going to do condition type equals condition ID. Perfect. And actually that it'll work. Better than nothing, I guess. Could probably add 2 more to that. Now this is just getting down to preference. Right? Like, Here we go. So what we want to do now too is we want to grab the error type. We want to put that in here. All right. And then we want to stop printing parameters. Okay, so we got our main here. Let's go here. We're gonna parameterize this really quick. Params login. Okay, and we're gonna say subscribe on load and have list page. So now though, I need to do app.route delete def delete subscriptions response equals twitch.send twitch request endpoint equals twitch.event sub endpoint. But the method is going to be delete. And actually, we need to list all of them first. So we need to go, okay, subscriptions. Then for each, for subscription in subscriptions. Okay. So that is hopefully it. Now what we need to do is we need to just check event sub reference, delete, revoke, remove, delete, hide. Oh, there we go. We send this as a parameter. Okay. So we send this, the ID. Looks like it's one at a time. So we're going to say params equals ID subscription dot ID. Actually, it's going to be this, right? Yeah. Let's go here. Make sure this print's perfect. Forbidden, 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 forbidden. Good, 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 good. List. A total of 63, and that's because we have a lot of the pending, a lot that are actually not supposed to be there, right? We're not validating these yet. We're just telling Twitch we want to know about these. We're gonna delete, and we got an error. Okay. String indices must be integers. So what do we get when we get a subscription? Go back to list, because this is exactly what we're getting. It's under data. Okay. Data. Okay. So when we send a delete, do we not get a JSON back? If method equals delete, return true. That's a good sign. Nice. Close. Did not return a valid response, and that is actually correct, but that's okay because we just copy this, say return deleted cool. And that should bring us back to here. Right, so we got all this subscribed, delete again, cool. And we go to list, should see nothing. Perfect, we got nothing. We started fresh, right? Clean slate. And that's where we're gonna leave off today. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna push this out. I'm not gonna print that exception anymore, actually. I'm probably going to go through here after I end stream, comment a bunch of things on, and then push it to the GitHub repository. However, right now, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to look at these changes. I'm going to say, okay, added delete view. We're going to commit that. We can actually close these now too. Did a whole lot of stuff in here. So we're going to summarize this by created subscribe method, redid type for events, and reimagined send Twitch request. So that we get more information out of it. You know, reimagine kind of covers all of that. Cancel. I didn't stage the file. Commit. Okay, and then I don't know that I can actually push from here. Last time I tried, it yelled at me. So we're just gonna do a git push. All right. Make sure that updated the repository. And there we go. 18 seconds ago. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Those of you who are there. Again, like I said, probably after I end stream here, I'm gonna most likely grab a snack, go through this. I'll add some comments to things, kind of explain what they do a little bit more in these files. And yeah, I'm hoping I can continue this project with you guys at some point in the future. So stay tuned. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons down below, please. And anything you have questions about, feel free to send it as a comment on this video. I'll take a look at them. I'll try to respond. I'll try to address them in the next time I come up live. I'm also going to be cutting this up into like a tutorial style thing. So as time goes on, we can have a playlist of this kind of cut down. So it's not me Googling and like figuring things out. It's more of straight to the point of, hey, this is how you do it tutorial style wise. So if that's something you guys would be interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button and keep an eye out for those videos. For now, I think we're just gonna hit the ending screen and yeah, take care everyone.